The modern day American farmers and ranchers are facing massive problems inside of today's world. And inside today's video, we're going to talk about the 3 biggest problems that farmers and ranchers are facing and how you can solve them. So jumping right into it, my friends, the first and biggest impact we have had in the past few years has simply been money printing, right? Everybody knows this. The government has went on a money printing spree since 2020. The US government debt load at the end of Q4 of 2019 was around $23 trillion. Fast forward to today, a short 4 years later, and we're already approaching $35 trillion. So we go from 23 up to 35 trillion. And they keep telling us, and they have told us for the past several years that, hey, inflation is transitory, right? Well, we know for a fact, dealing with our customers inside a legacy farmer, that their cash flow projections are not showing transitory prices. These higher input prices are here to stay. And the thing is when you're a farmer or rancher, these input prices, when grain prices start increasing, like we experienced in 21 and 22, the input prices follow. The only problem is on the downturn and the speediness of that downturn, when grain prices start to fall, those input prices do not fall near as fast. And it's impacting a lot of people today when it comes to your cash flows and everything like that. So the question is how do we combat this inflationary world that we are currently living in, and that I personally feel we are going to live in for a long time? Because at the end of the day, it's math and the government cannot afford to pay its bills. And so in order to do that, it's going to have to continue printing money year after year after year after year. And if you simply pull up a US debt chart, you're going to be able to see that the money printing has only escalated and gotten faster and faster over all of US history. So when it comes to combating this, guys, the biggest things that you have to get on point with is you have to know your numbers inside of your business. Very simple, right? Now, it's not always easy to do that. It's not always fun to do that. But the reality is when we are operating in the type of economic environment where we are today, where grain prices are obviously low, input prices are higher than what we need them, interest rates are higher, you have to become a student of your numbers. You have to master your numbers at a deep level. And the longer you avoid doing this, the more painful it's going to get. And I do not want to see family farm operations go out of business. But guess what? The hard facts and reality are that a majority of people even watching this video, or a majority of people that never even see this video, are going to go out of business in the future because deep down, they don't know their numbers, and the environment that we're operating in today is so vastly different than 10 to 15 years ago. People are going to get blindsided here, and unfortunately, their operation is just not going to exist much longer. So in order to combat this, my friend, you have to know your numbers. You have to find a system that is going to work for you so that you know exactly what your break-evens are as far as yield and price per field. You have to know how to negotiate your interest rate down. You have to know how to make sure your loans are structured correctly. You have to make sure that you are making sound business decisions, and if you don't know your numbers, you are going to be killed in today's market environment going forward. The next challenge that farmers and ranchers are really dealing with, it's honestly a lot of them aren't thinking about, is the lack of stability inside the banking industry. So I know that we have massive problems inside of the farming industry with people not knowing their numbers. Guys, after working with over 300 family farm operations across the country, I've gotten to experience how a lot of different banks operate. And to be honest, I am shocked that more banks are not shut down by the lack of due diligence and just keeping track of customers' financials that they're doing, right? Banks go through examinations every 18 to 24 months. And just the simple fact that these regulators are going in there and signing off and giving these banks a good score to where they can continue operating blows my mind, with, again, the lack of due diligence and what my customers are sharing with me on what their bank is doing behind closed doors. Now, I talk about that. We've also seen some banks actually go out of business, and I'm talking small community banks in the Midwest go out of business over the past 2 to 3 years because they got exposed. And the thing is that we're going to see more and more of this, because just how this high inflationary environment that we're living in has caused you as the farmer or producer to spend more money. The banks inherited that debt, right? They're carrying that debt for you. And the thing is, if they're not managing it correctly and you're not managing your numbers correctly, it's a perfect storm, right? And you can imagine this, but we are going to continue to see more banks going under, or more banks getting consolidated, I feel, over the next 3 to 5 years because of their lack of due diligence and not knowing their numbers. The thing is, though, is as a farmer or rancher, we assume that all banks are stable. Guys, that is the furthest thing from the truth. Unless you are actually looking at your bank's balance sheet and seeing how their assets and liabilities are structured and what their actual position is, you have no idea, right? And we experienced this with Silicon Valley Bank when it went under. I think it was a couple of years ago now, to where they had all these bonds on their balance sheet that ultimately went down in value massively, and they had to try to cover those losses, and just it was a massive storm there. And the thing is, though, is that there's a lot more banks in the same situation that we just don't know about yet, because the government has, since Silicon Valley Bank went under, created more short-term programs, right, that will allow funding for these banks to cover their devalued bond values inside of their balance sheet. There's all these things that they're trying to do to kick the can down the road, and eventually, my friends, the banks are going to be exposed as well. So it is up to you when you are working with a bank, or maybe you're even looking at moving your operation to a new bank. Just like the bank is interviewing you as a potential customer and whether or not you're going to be a good customer, you need to be interviewing the bank as well. Not only from their balance sheet and their financial position in that perspective, but also too, what's the culture like in that bank? How do the loan officers operate? Are they timely? Do they give you the service that you need here? Guys, you should be demanding a certain level of service here. Now, if you're demanding a certain level of service, there should be a certain level of accountability from you as well to be a good customer for the bank and making sure that you're providing accurate financials in a timely manner and things like that. Just what you would expect from the bank, you should be expecting from yourself as well. But again, these are some of the helpful things that you can do that are going to make sure that you are working with a sound financial bank as well to make sure that your operation is safe from that perspective as well. All right, guys, now the last point here inside of this video, number 3, is very similar to what I mentioned on how to combat inflation in point number 1 is, and number 3 is farmers and ranchers simply do not know their numbers at the level that they need to, guys. And I'm talking from just very simply having your numbers structured and organized from a business perspective. We have hundreds of customers that have come into Legacy Farmer over the years where they had 3 sources of income going through one bank account. They had no idea where they were making money, right? So when you don't know the profit and losses of each individual business, how do you know where you should be spending your time, right? How do you know where you're getting the biggest return on investment for your time? And a lot of people, if they really started calculating it out, they're at a negative return on investment. They're actually at negative dollars per hour because they're spending a lot of time on a business that is not generating the profits or the revenue that they need in order to move the business forward. The next piece here, and this is something that we talk about very heavily inside of Legacy Farmer, is your borrowing power. Now, your borrowing power is what is going to tell you what your exact position is with the bank and really how much leverage you have over them as a customer, but also too, it's going to tell you what the bank's position is with you so you know how they're looking at your operation. This is the number one thing that is going to give you the most leverage when you are working with your bank. And we've seen this time and time again with customers coming in. We start off and we help them get their numbers organized just by getting some simple business structure set up. Then we start breaking apart the numbers into separate balance sheets. And this allows us to understand what the borrowing power is with their banking institution. And this is where the leverage comes in because you're able to see how much risk the bank is taking on you, which then gives you the ability to negotiate terms, interest rates, things like that when it comes to your loans, and just make sure that you're getting the best service and deals from your bank as well. And guys, the next thing that this trickles down to is cash flow projections, right? You have to know where you're at on a month-by-month basis. I have said this over and over again that annual cash flow projections and only doing this once per year is a massive disservice to your operation. You need to be doing month-by-month cash flow projections. So we start from business structure, then we go to borrowing power, so you know what your position is with the bank, you know what the bank's position is with you, but then we go to cash flow where you can make sure that you are managing and projecting out your cash flow the right way and planning for these things way ahead of time. We could have avoided so many mistakes and so many struggles and so much stress and anxiety for a lot of farmers in this country, especially back in 22 and really 23 here, when we had this downturn in grain prices, because so many of them were not projecting that. So many of them didn't have the numbers laid out to where they could see that this was going to happen 6 months from now. So they essentially got caught with their pants down in the middle of harvest when they maxed out their operating line of credit. And now they're calling their bank, they're stressed out, their bills are past due, they're trying to get an increase in the operating line of credit or a side operating line of credit. This is what the cash flow projections are going to allow you to avoid, full stop. And we have seen this time and time again. And once you start operating this way, it changes how you view your business. It changes the decisions that you're making. And this is why you must know your numbers, because majority of farmers and ranchers today are completely shooting from the hip with massive financial decisions that they're making inside the operation here. And it's causing a lot of stress and anxiety and just problems, not only in the business, guys, but this carries over into other areas of life and how you operate as a leader in your household, as a husband, as a father, as a leader inside your community, how you treat your body, the stories that you tell yourself. There's all these compounding consequences that come up for you in other areas of your life when you simply don't know the numbers inside of your business. So this is why point number 3 is so freaking important. And this is the number one thing that we focus on inside of Legacy Farmer, is taking a customer that has operated a business in absolute confusion and chaos for years and taking them through a proven process that we have been through hundreds of times with hundreds of customers over the years, and taking them from confusion and chaos to confidence and clarity to where they can actually look at their numbers and use that to drive the big financial decisions that they're making inside of their business, which will ultimately help them get the business to where they want it to be long term. So my friends, at the end of the day, today, if you are watching this video and you are connecting with everything that I'm saying here, then I simply invite you to learn more about Legacy Farmer. There's going to be a link below this video somewhere that you can click and schedule a call with our team. It's going to be a free call. You're going to answer some quick questions there just so we have some context on your operation before we step into the call. We want to make sure the call is a really valuable call for you and for us, give you some clarity on some things you can do. But ultimately on the call, we're going to decide on, hey, are we a good fit to actually work together? And if we are, you're going to get an invitation to work one-on-one with our team. And if we're not, guess what? We go our separate ways. You get to still consume this content and hopefully learn a lot of things from it. But at the end of the day, my friends, these three problems are plaguing a majority of farmers and ranchers inside this country. So the question for you is, how much longer are you going to allow these problems to impact your life before you actually do something about it? If you are at this point where you are ready to do something about it, click on the link below, schedule a call with our team, and we'll see you on the call.